I never imagined I'd be the one sharing something like this. For years, I was just a silent reader scrolling through endless posts on Reddit. Stories of revenge, betrayal, families tearing each other apart. I'd shake my head, sometimes laugh nervously, sometimes get angry for strangers on the internet. I never thought one day I would become the main character. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's not just another piece of drama for late-night entertainment. It's my life. My story of how the man I loved and my husband decided that money was worth more than my existence. He found out something I didn't even know. I was the heir to a fortune left behind by a relative I had lost contact with years ago. Instead of telling me, instead of celebrating with me, he chose betrayal. During what seemed like an ordinary trip to our favorite spot by the Pacific Ocean, he smiled, held my waist, and then shoved me off the cliff. He thought the waves would swallow me forever. He thought he'd walk away rich and free. But he was wrong. I survived. And what followed turned into my own revenge story, a journey through shock, fear, justice, and rebirth. This is not just about betrayal. This is about how I was buried alive in lies, how I came back, and how the people who tried to erase me were forced to face the truth. There is more to come, and if you don't want to miss the next stories as soon as they are released, subscribe and hit the bell. This is where my story begins. My name is Sophie Harrison. At 32, I thought I had finally built the kind of life I had dreamed about since I was a teenager. I owned a small but cozy bakery cafe in the coastal town of Monterey, California. Every cake, every pastry, every smile from a satisfied customer felt like proof that I had chosen the right path. I had always been stubborn and independent. While my friends got married right after college and started families, I finished culinary school in San Francisco, working nights as a waitress to save enough for my own place. For me, it was important to achieve everything on my own, not to be someone's wife with a business handed down by her husband. And yet, a husband did appear. His name was Michael Harrison. He was 5 years older than me, tall and strong, with a disarming smile that melted my doubts. He worked in an auto shop along the Pacific Coast Highway, fixing tourist cars and long-haul trucks. He had a way of talking that made me feel like I was the only person who mattered to him. And I believed him. Our marriage wasn't a fairy tale, but I thought it was honest. He teased me for taking baking too seriously, and I teased him for never being able to wash the grease from his hands. We rarely fought. We lived modestly, but steadily. That morning he suggested, let's go on a picnic back to our spot overlooking the ocean. We haven't been there in so long. Maybe we'll bring back a little luck. He smiled as if it was a joke. I hesitated. There was so much work, and the weekend orders were waiting. But his eyes shone with nostalgia, and my heart softened. I agreed. We drove along the winding coastal road. The sun broke through the morning fog. The wind smelled of salt and pine. Michael turned on the old playlist with our songs, the ones we used to dance to in the kitchen. I leaned against his shoulder and almost believed everything was the way it used to be. When we reached the cliff, I inhaled deeply. Below, the Pacific roared, waves crashing against the rocks. The air was cold and sharp. I spread my arms, laughing like a carefree girl. And then his hand slipped around my waist. At first I thought he wanted to pull me close like before, but the grip tightened. In the next instant, a push was sharp and merciless. The ground disappeared beneath me. I was falling straight into the raging ocean. The wind tore the scream from my throat, the world flipped, and then only water, icy, unforgiving. The waves slammed into me, knocking the air out of my chest. Salt burned my throat. I tried to fight, but every breath brought in more bitter water. Thoughts flickered in fragments. This is the end. Michael just killed me. Darkness pressed in, the ocean dragged me down, and my strength ebbed away. Panic turned to emptiness. The last thought that flashed, I will never see my town, my cafe, my future again. Consciousness returned in fragments. First came the pain, the crushing weight on my chest, every attempt to breathe searing my lungs with salt, as if I had swallowed broken glass. Then the muffled crackle of firewood. I tried to move, but my body felt foreign, unbearably heavy. "Easy," a man's voice said, low and rough, as if he was used to long silences. "You're safe." I froze. It wasn't Michael. My lips were dry, but I managed to whisper, "Where am I?" "In my cabin," he replied calmly. "I pulled you out of the ocean." The rim of a cup touched my lips. Cool water filled my mouth. I choked, but greedily swallowed another sip. My throat burned, but with it came the realization I was alive. The man's name was Jacob Coleman. He looked to be around 40, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and a gaze that carried a quiet authority. Later, I learned he had once been a police officer in San Diego, but after his brother's death in the line of duty, he left the city. Now he lived here, alone, on the edge of the coastal forest in a wooden cabin he had built with his own hands. For the first days, I slept almost constantly. Jacob fed me broth, changed the bandages on my arms and face, helped me sit up and lie back down. When my strength slowly began to return, I studied him more closely. His face was weathered, carved by sun and wind, his eyes grey-blue and sharp, the kind of eyes that made you feel seen through. One afternoon, he led me out to the cliffs near his cabin. The ocean thundered below, the wind cut across my face, and my knees trembled beneath me. Jacob held out a steady hand. "It's quiet here," he said. "Too quiet," I whispered. "That's exactly what you need right now." Soon after, a woman came to the cabin. Short, wiry, her piercing eyes framed by a wool shawl. "This is Aunt Ruth," Jacob said. "She's the local healer." She took my hands in hers, her fingers surprisingly warm. "You were betrayed by the one you called your own," she said softly but firmly. "For money and for another woman." I froze. I wanted to scream that she was wrong, but the memory of that push on the cliff cut through me like ice. A few days later, Jacob returned from another trip into town. His boots were caked with wet sand and clay, his expression grim. "I checked the cliff," he said. "There were 2 sets of footprints. You didn't fall, you were pushed." Something broke inside me. I remembered his hands around my waist. That sudden, merciless shove. But why? My voice shook. Jacob set a small portable radio in front of me and switched it on. Static crackled, then a local announcer's voice filled the room. "Authorities in Monterey County report a tragedy. Local cafe owner Sophie Harrison has died after falling from the cliffs along the coast. Her husband is grieving the loss. The funeral has already taken place." I stared into emptiness. Died. Funeral. They had buried someone else under my name. My husband told the world I no longer existed. My chest tightened. The ground vanished beneath me once again, this time not physically, but inside. I had died for the world. My husband had erased me. After hearing the radio announcement, something inside me broke. My name, spoken in that flat announcer's tone, was no longer mine. Michael had convinced everyone I was gone. They even held a funeral for someone else buried under my name. Jacob stayed silent, giving me space. But a few days later, he returned from town with a grave expression. "The cliff wasn't the only evidence," he said. "You were betrayed, and not just by your husband." He set a notebook in front of me. Witnesses had seen Michael in town with a woman, young, polished, with the air of someone who knew too much. "Lily Parker," Jacob explained. "She works at a notary office here in Monterey." The name meant nothing to me, but my heart clenched. If Michael was spending time with a notary's assistant, someone who dealt with wills and legal documents every day, this wasn't a coincidence. I wanted to tell myself it was a mistake, that maybe she was just helping him with paperwork. But Jacob shook his head. "They've been together for months. People saw them at cafes, walking in the park, even near a roadside motel, and she wasn't just holding his hand, she was handing him papers. That's when a long-buried memory surfaced. My mother's brother, Robert Bauer, had lived in Chicago. He never married, never had children. For me, though, as a girl, he had been almost a second father. He taught me chess, bought me books, took me to museums. He used to call me his little smart one. But after Mom died, our contact faded. Life pulled me into school, then work, then my cafe. Letters came less often. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Now Jacob told me the truth. Robert had passed away a few years earlier. He left behind a considerable estate. And because I was his only niece, the only family he ever truly cared for, he had left it all to me. The sum was staggering, $16 million. Michael had found out, through Lily, and together they decided I had to disappear. A wave of nausea rolled over me. Michael hadn't just cheated on me, he had calculated, plotted, and chosen to erase me for money. I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. Tears wouldn't come. Only a sharp, burning sense of betrayal. He wanted to kill me for money? My voice trembled. For money, and for her, Jacob said. His grey-blue eyes locked onto mine, steady and relentless. But now we know what they are after, and that truth gives us leverage. He leaned closer. Sophie, you need to be ready. We're going to get proof, but the truth might be even heavier than you imagine. I nodded in silence. The woman I had been, the wife who thought her marriage could be saved, was gone. I had been buried alive once. Now I had risen, no longer a victim, but someone ready to fight. The plan came together quickly. Jacob laid it out bluntly. We need a recorded confession somewhere they'll feel safe, off guard. A quiet restaurant by the ocean. He'll think he's in control there. That's when we'll catch him. Just the thought of seeing Michael again made me shake. The man who once held my hand at the altar, who whispered promises of forever, he had shoved me into the waves like I was nothing. Now I had to face him. But Jacob was calm, steady, solid as a rock. His certainty gave me strength. We prepared carefully, a hidden camera in Jacob's jacket, a recorder in his pocket, hand signals we agreed on. My part was to stay out of sight until the right moment. The restaurant was tucked into a quiet cove, away from the tourists. Through the wide windows came the sound of surf and the smell of salt air. Soft light glowed over half-empty tables. I hid behind a partition, my heart pounding so loud I thought the whole place could hear it. Jacob sat calmly at the central table, as if he belonged there. The door opened. Michael walked in, his stride as arrogant as ever. Beside him was Lily Parker, dressed sharply, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. Her eyes darted nervously. Michael Harrison, Jacob said evenly, his voice carrying just enough steel. I know what you did, and I know why. You want this to disappear, then confess, or I take it all to the police. Michael smirked. You're bluffing, am I? Jacob pulled out his phone, showing the glow of a screen. I've got enough to bury you already, but this is your chance to tell the truth. Lily's voice broke the silence. Michael, what's he talking about? You told me it was an accident. Just shut up, Michael snapped. But she pressed on. You promised no one would ever know. I trembled behind the partition, listening. Jacob's tone stayed ice cold. An accident? Or did you push your wife into the ocean? Michael's face turned red, veins bulging on his neck. She was in the way, he shouted. Always obsessed with her stupid cafe, never with me. I was done with her dragging me down. What was I supposed to do? The words cut deeper than the fall itself. My husband, the man I loved, had just confessed in public that my life meant less to him than money and ego. Jacob gave me the signal. My legs felt lightly, but I stepped out into the open. Surprise, Michael, I said, my voice shaking. He froze. His face drained of color. No, I buried you. You're dead. Not quite, I replied, standing tall though my hands trembled. Now everyone knows the truth. Michael panicked, lashing out, but Jacob was faster. The former cop's reflexes hadn't faded. The handcuffs clicked into place like it was second nature. Lily broke down immediately. "It wasn't my idea. He said it was the only way. I just showed him the papers. I didn't think he'd actually—" Her words tumbled out, frantic, but it didn't matter. The camera was recording, the audio was clear. Everything they said would stand in court. Then came the flashing lights. Patrol cars pulled up outside, red and blue reflections spilling across the restaurant walls. Officers stormed in, and in moments Michael was dragged away, cursing and spitting, his voice nothing more than empty noise. Lily followed, still sobbing her confessions. I stood there, watching them disappear into the night. For the first time since that terrible day on the cliff, I could finally breathe. After that night at the restaurant, everything moved quickly. The recordings, Michael's confession, Lily's panicked admissions were more than enough. The police filed charges almost immediately. The next morning, my story was everywhere. On the radio, on local TV, in the papers, Monterey mechanic arrested for attempted murder of his wife, notary office employee charged as accomplice, victim believed dead returns alive with proof of betrayal. I sat in Jacob's cabin, listening numb. Yesterday I was a ghost, legally buried. Today I was a headline. People in town whispered when I walked by, "That's her, the woman who came back from the dead." The trial was crowded. Journalists filled the benches, flashbulbs popping, pens scratching. Michael sat in the defendant's box, his chin high, arrogance etched into every line of his face. He tried to stare me down, as if he still held power. "This is all a setup," he shouted once. "She's supposed to be dead. This is a trick." But then the court replayed his own voice. "She was in the way. What was I supposed to do?" The room went silent. Even the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Lily broke down quickly. She admitted to giving Michael access to documents, to discussing my inheritance with him, though she insisted she never thought he'd really do it. Her tears didn't move anyone. The verdict was clear. Michael received decades in prison, a sentence so long he would never walk free as the man he once was. Lily got less time, but enough to end her career, her reputation, her life as she knew it. When the judge read the final decision, I felt the weight of years lift from my chest. Justice at last. But justice didn't erase the nightmares. I woke drenched in sweat, gasping for air, tasting salt water in my throat. I'd see Michael's face in the dark, hear the crash of waves. Healing wasn't instant. At first, walking into my cafe felt impossible. People stared. Some offered sympathy, others whispered behind my back. But I decided I wouldn't hide. My cafe was mine, my work, my pride, my proof that I had built something real. When the notary confirmed my inheritance, the number almost didn't seem real. $16 million. Enough to change a life forever. Enough to kill for. But I refused to let that money be a symbol of death. It became a symbol of survival. I invested in what I loved most, baking. My little shop in Monterey blossomed into a chain. Soon there were branches in Santa Cruz, San Jose, even San Francisco. I hired young bakers, students from culinary schools, dreamers who reminded me of myself. Every new storefront with my name on it felt like a declaration. I survived. You didn't erase me. I'm still here. Through it all, Jacob was there. Not pushing, not prying. Just present. Fixing a broken lock in the cafe, walking me home when I worked too late, sitting quietly with a cup of coffee across from me. Sometimes he didn't speak at all, and yet his silence gave me more comfort than words ever could. Months passed. The trial ended, the cafes flourished, but something inside still felt unfinished. I realized I needed to face the ocean again, the place where my life had nearly ended. I went at dawn. The horizon glowed gold, the Pacific rolling endlessly, powerful and alive. I stood on the sand for a long time, listening. Once that roar had been my death sentence. Now it sounded like freedom. I stepped into the surf. The water bit cold at my ankles, then my knees, then my chest. My breath caught, but I didn't stop. I let the ocean surround me, wash over me. The fear was still there, but so was something new. Strength. Images flooded back, the shove, the fall, the dark water pulling me down. But instead of panic, I felt resolve. I had come back. I had beaten him. When I walked out, dripping and shivering, Jacob was waiting on the shore. He held out his hand, steady as ever. This time, I didn't need it to stand. But I took it anyway. How was it? He asked. Like being born again, I said. And I smiled a real smile, the first in so long. There were no promises between us, no declarations. Just understanding. Respect. And a warmth that told me maybe, just maybe, I could trust again. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. I lost love, trust, even my very identity. But the ocean gave me back something greater, freedom. And I knew one thing for certain: no one would ever erase me again. Looking back now, I realize this wasn't just a story about betrayal and survival. It was my transformation. I learned that love without respect is nothing but an empty shell. I learned that money can corrupt people, but it doesn't have to destroy you. I learned that strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising again. And most of all, trust is the most fragile thing we have. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to restore. I survived, built a new life. But most importantly, I found myself again. That's the end of today's story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so share them in the comments below. I truly enjoy reading what you have to say. If you'd like more, check out the full playlist linked in the description of this video. New real stories are on the way, and I'd love to share them with you. Hopefully, I'll see you next time. If this journey resonated with you, please hit subscribe and tap the bell so you'll never miss the latest stories. Thank you for listening.